Thanks everybody for getting back in here with your lunch, and please try to enjoy your lunch while we press on here. I'm Captain Chuck Dyer. I'm the MEC chairman for the FedEx MEC, and that's going to come to an end for me here in a couple of days on Monday, so I'm at the end of my term and very close to the end of my career when I retire in October. So it really is, it's my most sincere pleasure to be here to introduce the next speaker. And those of you that came to the last year's ALPA Air Safety Forum will remember this speaker because she provided us with her perspective on managing risk. And today we're going to look forward to hearing her thoughts on focusing on the human in the system. Ms. Bobbi Wells is the Vice President of Safety and Airworthiness at FedEx Express. Ms. Wells is responsible for the air safety, quality assurance, quality control, and airworthiness records programs at FedEx Express. She joined FedEx Express in 1993, serving most recently as the Managing Director of Planning and Analysis and Air Operations. She was responsible for creating the framework for the airline's strategic plan and performance metrics. In addition to earning the prestigious FedEx 5-Star Award 3 times for outstanding leadership and achievement, Ms. Wells was selected for the exclusive FedEx Excel Drive program designed to develop targeted executives. She also serves on the board of directors for the International Aviation Women's Association. Before joining FedEx, Ms. Wells served 10 years in the U.S. Army as a logistics officer, and during her time in the military, she received several awards, including the Meritorious Service Medal and Joint Service Commendation Medal. She was born and raised in Pinedale, Wyoming, and holds a MBA from the University of Memphis and a BA from the University of Notre Dame. Bobbi's married and has 2 sons. I wanted to talk just for a second about my encounter with Bobbi. When I became chairman at FedEx, our relationship between the union's safety organs and the company's safety organs had become, I will be kind and say, dysfunctional. There was a feeling of almost adversarial relationship, which to me did not seem sane. It just didn't work, and I wanted to change it. And so I arranged a meeting with Bobbi's boss and Bobbi, and offered them a partnership, and said we wanted a real partnership for safety, that we weren't interested in industrializing safety. We wanted to fix problems, and we wanted to make our airline safer. And with almost 5,000 pilots and all those eyeballs all over the world and all the countries and the far-flung places we operate, I felt that we were missing a real opportunity by not having those people really committed equally to the program. In return for making that offer, her boss got up, walked around the room, stuck his hand out, and said, "Okay, let's do this thing." Shortly thereafter was my first encounter with Bobbi, and I realized the game had changed almost immediately because we were still caught up in the past. We were caught up in voicing past grievances and why we mistrusted each other. And myself and my team began that partnership by once again going back to voice some of those grievances and go back through some of the negative things. And Bobbi, to her credit, stopped it right there. And she basically said, we can talk about the past if you want to, but I'm more interested in the future. And I think that's where we need to focus. And she has been true to her word ever since then. And I've been able to get to enjoy the partnership that we've done. And I have no doubt that we've moved FedEx in the right direction, and we're taking our safety game, to the level I think it should be played at. What I would tell you is overcoming distrust and changing cultures is not easy. And we've heard some things up here today about some of the challenges that go with the human in the system. And I know that distrust is a cancer when you're trying to bring the human into a system. And so the fact that we've been able to move the ball the way we have and all the challenges that go with this, and the naysayers on both sides trying to overcome that, Bobbi has been right there with me all the way. She has held up her end of the deal admirably, and her words and her deeds have never faltered, not once. and I find her to be an amazing, reliable partner and a tireless advocate for safety and for risk management. And she is not afraid to challenge orthodoxy. I've seen it. And I'm very proud to call her a friend, and I'm happy to ask her up here today, and I'm glad they asked me to do this for her. So, Bobbi Wells. I have one thing to do, the human and the machine, and do that.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for that amazing introduction, and thank you also for the invitation to speak to you all today. This is a tremendous opportunity for me, not only to talk about some ideas I have in this space, but to learn from all of you. The discussions this morning were incredibly interesting. Let me also say, before I let him get too far away, he gives me way too much credit. Partnerships exist because of the mutual efforts, equal efforts on both sides. We would not be able to be where we are today just 2 years later if he hadn't shown the leadership and the fortitude to do the right thing, not only for FedEx, which is important, but really for the aviation community, because that's really what we do in safety. That's what matters. It's not just about one carrier, it's about all of us. Thanks, Chuck. What's the most powerful force on the face of the planet? This is the interactive portion. It's not gravity. Nope. It's not magnetism. Let me see if I can advance my slides. Here we go. It's not gravity. It's not magnetism. And it's not solar power. It's not the sun. Oops. The most powerful force on the planet are human beings. Interestingly, it's the force we know really the least about. We know way more about how our bodies work than how our minds work. If we can figure out in aviation how to harness that capability, how to harness that energy, then we have a chance to really elevate our system safety. There are 3 things from today. The first is we have to understand better how human beings think, because that drives how we behave. The second thing is we have to understand, and it was talked about quite a bit this morning, human performance and how we enhance and support and leverage that human performance. Then finally, as we talk about the human being in the center of the system, we have to understand how that human being reacts and is influenced by an evolving, complex system. So they don't exist apart, it's together. We're in a wonderful space in aviation. We are in the safest transportation industry in the world. More people died at railroad crossings last year in the United States than died in commercial aviation. Nobody else can say that but us. That's both a blessing, a tremendous blessing, and something we're all very grateful for. And it's also a curse. I heard a question this morning that hinted to the hubris that can develop from that. The reason why that's an issue is the minute we start talking about ourselves as experts in this space, I think is the time when we need to be worried that we're no longer curious. The things that we did in the past will not be the things that help us solve our problems in the future. Einstein said it very well. There's a group of Stoic philosophers that understood how the human mind worked, and Ovid is one of those philosophers. Difficulty is something we try to avoid as human beings. It's uncomfortable. We like to be comfortable. Our brains like to do the same things over and over again. It's the reason we check out and watch TV. It's the reason we use our phones to connect with the world, so we don't have to think about or be introduced by or challenged by really hard stuff. The problem with that is that that's not where we grow. Growth comes from stuff that we don't like, spaces where we're uncomfortable. And yet that's where opportunity exists for us as well. Chuck mentioned I grew up in a very small town in Wyoming, and my dad was an avid skier. He was an expert skier. Every weekend growing up, we would go, and during the winter, we would go to the ski hill. All 4 kids would pack up with my parents and we'd go ski because my dad was on ski patrol. So he'd have to be there every weekend, which means we had to go as well. Now, my dad was so good and he wanted all of us to be equally good. So he taught us all to ski. And when I was an early teenager, he said to me, you know, Bobbi, if you really were willing to focus and concentrate and work really hard, you could be a really excellent skier. It was never a desire of mine to ski race in high school. My brother was on the racing team. I didn't want a downhill ski race. I didn't really want to be an expert skier. I wanted to be able to ski with my girlfriends and be able to negotiate the hill well and get to the bottom successfully. I just wanted to have fun. And I said, you know, Dad, I'm good with how good I am at my skiing. And he said, don't you want to be better? Don't you want to be the best you can be? And I said, you know, Dad, what I really don't want is I don't want to fall down. Anybody ski? Falling down is not fun. It's not fun. It discourages you from doing it, from pushing yourself. Because not only is there a great chance that you're going to lose a ski or some poles and things go all over the place, but you could be in inches of powder, which make it almost impossible to get back up on your feet and get that ski back on your boot. So I didn't want to fall down, and I told him that. And he said to me, you know, Bobbi, if you're not falling down, you're not learning. Learning is hard for us. And interestingly, we expect that as adults, we really should stop learning. We like to be comfortable. We don't want to be challenged. There was a discussion this morning about going to training. The problem with going to training and the reason we don't like it, the reason we don't look forward to it, is because what if we're asked something we're not prepared for? That can be a problem. We have to teach ourselves and the people we support to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's a hard space to be in because there's a lot of risk associated with it. Okay, there we go. The Stoic philosophers also believed that we had a lot of irrational beliefs as human beings. There was a number of discussions this morning that talked about human beings make mistakes. Of course they make mistakes. We know that about the people we work around. We provide that space for the people who work for us. But the problem that we have is that we have this incredibly irrational belief about ourselves. We're expected to be perfect. We put ourselves on a pedestal in terms of our expectations, so when we make mistakes, it keeps us from letting go of those mistakes, learning from them, and letting go of them and moving on. That's a problem because it doesn't allow us the ability to fall down, as I talked about, learn from that, grow through introspection, and then move on. Not having that capability of moving on is something that we have to allow ourselves as individuals. And the reason why this is important isn't just for this audience here in the room. The reason why this is important is because this is how all the people you are all servicing, the people I support, that's how they all think as well. And if we aren't talking to them about how it's okay to make mistakes, it's something that's expected. And not only should we allow that for our children when we're raising them, learning to walk and they fall down and we expect them to be able to crawl over, pull themselves back up and give it another try, but we have to have that allowance for ourselves. Every single minute, we tell ourselves between 300 and 1,000 words a minute. We have that dialogue going on in our heads. And we get to choose whether that dialogue is a positive dialogue, positive self-talk, or it's negative self-talk. The direction that we choose to head and our ability to disrupt negative self-talk is essential. Because without that, we won't grow as human beings. All of this has to do with how people think, which then leads to how people behave. And it explains in large parts why people react the way they do in the situations we find ourselves in. There was a study done a number of years ago with dolphin trainers. If I can get my slide to come up. There we go. The researchers wanted to understand how dolphin trainers interacted with the dolphins. So they separated the dolphin trainers into two groups. They asked the control group to get into the pool with the dolphins, the same dolphins they interacted with every day. They wanted them to run through their list of commands with the dolphin trainers, and they were going to be observing them. They said, we're going to measure how quickly the dolphins swim to you individually. And these were trainers, of course. These are trainers that the dolphins knew. We're going to measure how accurate are they as they respond to each of those questions. And then we're going to measure how long do they stay actively engaged with you. How soon after you're done with the commands do they disconnect and swim away. They told the experimental group to get into the pool with the same list of questions, same dolphins. And they said, as you run through those list of commands and interact with these dolphins that you know well, we want you to think about how, as each dolphin swims toward you, how that dolphin's unique compared to all the other dolphins. Dolphins are just like horses and dogs or cats or whatever. They have personalities. So think about how that dolphin is unique compared to the other dolphins. Then also pay attention to, try to pay specific attention to how that dolphin behaves differently today. Because dolphins have moods. Watch for that. And by the way, while you're in the pool with the dolphins, we're going to measure how quickly they swim towards you, how accurate they are in responding to those commands, and how long they stay engaged with you. So they conducted the experiment. Interestingly, the researchers found that the experimental group with the dolphins, the same dolphins, scored significantly higher in how quickly the dolphins swam toward them, how accurate they were in responding to the commands, and how long they stayed engaged after the commands were finished. Now, obviously, the dolphins didn't know they were part of a research project. All the dolphins understood was whether they were being paid attention to. The superpower that human beings have, and it's available to every single one of us every day, is our power of attention. When you pay attention to something, you are giving a little slice of your life to that thing. You're dictating by that attention the value of that thing in your life. And the problem with that is that we're not really very good about knowing how to manage and harness our attention. We like to be comfortable, as I said before. 40 to 50% of our time we operate out of habit. You heard some of that discussion earlier today. When you drive your car to work, if you take the same path, I can almost guarantee you that most of the time you're in the car, you are not paying attention to what you're doing, not actively. You've done it many times. Your neural pathways in your brain are well trodden when it comes to driving to work. And I suspect most of you, if not all of you, have arrived at work and realized you don't remember very much about the drive. Because you were thinking about what you did over the weekend, you're thinking about, dang, I've got that meeting coming up with my boss, I really don't want to meet with him. Or you're thinking about what's coming up in the future, or what you screwed up, or what you're worried, you're anticipating you're going to screw up. You're giving away, we all are, giving away pieces of our attention to things that don't matter. At FedEx, we're working to find ways to harness that capability with our pilots. We have a research project that we've launched. We're calling the Human Performance Initiative, so I thought it was great hearing about human performance this morning, where the goal is to teach our pilots how to actively pay attention. And the objective of that research project is to find out the best techniques to deal with startle, surprise, and complacency on the flight deck. Startle and surprise are things that we're hearing a lot about. One of the things that I have concerns about is complacency, and I'm not talking about the actively checking out kind of complacency. I'm talking about the thing that just happens because you're doing the same things over and over and over again. Things come as they are expected. Because when that happens, and then there is some disruption, you get an unexpected direction from ATC or some unexpected message, whatever it might be, the problem is it's hard to center your focus and re-engage. Not only that, but when you're in a startle or surprise event, and there was some discussion about that this morning, the back of your brain, our lizard brain, takes over. Any change in your life, your amygdala interprets that change as immediate death threat, because your amygdala doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have reason. It doesn't have an association that says, nah, that's a rubber snake, not a real snake, no worries. That's what your prefrontal cortex is for, that executive function. And when your amygdala hijacks your brain, your prefrontal cortex doesn't get to participate. There are specific techniques that we can teach pilots that will allow their prefrontal cortex to re-engage so that they can make sure that that tunnel vision that happens necessarily, it's part of our biology for when tigers were attacking us, et cetera, that we open up that tunnel vision and take advantage of all the information available so that we can make the very best decision. Not only that, but those techniques will help in our daily lives. They help us when we prepare to do things that we'd prefer not doing, like maybe speaking in front of groups of people. They help us deal with situations that might be challenging or unusual, or where we feel threatened, like going to training. It helps us be better engaged, it improves our health. There are many, many, many benefits to these techniques. So I'm excited about that project, and I think it's critically important. Another of the Stoic philosophers, who's actually one of my favorites, his name's Epictetus, and he believed that we're not affected by what happens to us as much as we like to say, gosh, you made me sad. You didn't make me sad. I chose to be sad because of something you said. So it's not about what happens to us. It's about what happens in our head as we interpret what happens to us. And we have tremendous power over this. By the way, this gentleman was a slave for most of his life. And he was able to rise above that in his thinking by saying, well, I might be beholden to my owner. He doesn't own my ability to think. I get to choose that. These are ways that we can ensure that our pilots are equipped so that they can be successful going forward. And this is particularly important because of how they see themselves fitting into the system. German Shepherds and pilots are alike. And in fact, German Shepherds and Navy SEALs are alike. There was a study done with German Shepherds where they wanted, it was a cause and effect kind of research project. And what they wanted to do was see if they could test the connection of a ringing buzzer with the German Shepherds jumping over a low barrier to avoid an electric shock that would be introduced through the floor. So they set up the experiment and they launched it. And they found, interestingly, that there were a group of these German Shepherds who were not jumping over the barrier. This buzzer would sound, the dogs would start whimpering, and then just sit there and take the electric shock. Now, the researchers, you can imagine, after watching this for a little while, thought either we better figure this out or we need to find a new profession, because this is not fun torturing dogs. So they went back and looked at their research notes, and they found that with that particular group of German Shepherds, there wasn't a strong connection between the buzzer and the ability to escape the electric shock. So the dogs had developed a victim scenario in their heads. And they didn't believe there was a solution, even though the solution was obviously available. I mean, German Shepherds are pretty smart dogs. They couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out that there was that strong association, and so therefore they didn't jump over the barrier. Of a group of 100 Navy SEAL candidates in a class, a very, very small number of Navy SEALs actually graduate, are successful executing the program. And they were interested in what is it about the ones who are successful that we can help figure out, let's draw better candidates, because we want to increase our numbers of successful candidates. Now, they took a look across these candidates, and interestingly, like you'd expect, all the candidates were strong and they had good stamina, they were smart. Everybody at the table is smart when you're a Navy SEAL. You have to be or you didn't make the cut. They were very achievement-oriented and interested, goal-setting, focused, that sort of thing. So it wasn't any of the normal parameters. It wasn't the tallest guys or the strongest guys or the ones who had the best wind and could hold their breaths longest underwater. It wasn't any of the things that we'd normally think about if we had a Navy SEAL standing up here next to me. Interestingly, what they found was that in the particular part of the training that involved, was toward later in their training after they'd learned a lot of their underwater skills, they were put into a pool to simulate doing their work, might be welding underwater, or delivering explosives, or whatever it might be, and the dive instructors were under the water with them. And they simulated difficult conditions by yanking the regulator out of their mouth and tying a knot in the hose, and then disrupting them further by simulating sort of rough currents and that sort of thing. They found that the candidates who were successful tended to be the ones who told themselves a story that said, I have the capability to solve this problem. I have the right training. There's a solution here. They did not put me in this pool to watch me drown, and I'm going to be able to find the solution. I just have to have the presence of mind to manage my energy and my thoughts so that I don't feel like I'm going to die unless I pop to the surface to breathe. Those were the successful candidates. They believed they had a solution. The candidates who were not successful were the ones who were playing this dialogue in their head that said, you know what, that trainer didn't like me anyway. And that one over there, he wants me to die, and he's not even going to call my mom and tell her what happened. I'm stuck here, I'm alone, I'm going to be unsuccessful. I knew I couldn't be successful in this training. Let me pop to the surface, swim to the side, and ring the bell, signaling that I give up. I think that's critically important because our pilots, when they're flying, have a lot of resources available to them. But their risk is higher when they're in a startle, surprise, or difficult some sort of emergency situation. If they believe they have the training and capability for a solution, then they'll look for that solution rather than assuming they're not going to be successful, which means they will pay attention to the signals around them on the flight deck and solve that solution. I recently read an article that talked about how automation is unchallenging pilots. I don't think that's the right approach. I don't think automation is the enemy here. Automation certainly presents some challenges, but part of that is because we can't expect pilots to continue to fly airplanes the way they did decades ago in the environment we currently operate. It's not appropriate. So we have to arm our pilots to understand that while automation presents a lot of advantages, because it's not going anywhere, we're not taking it off the airplanes, it helps our pilots. By the same token, we have to make sure they're equipped with the knowledge to understand when and how that automation works, how to make it the most successful, and to understand that just like everything else at their fingertips, it is a tool for them to decide to deploy depending on the situation. Human beings are incredibly resilient. They can grow no matter how little soil there is for them to be planted in. It's our responsibility as leaders and as technicians in this area to help ensure that they're going to blossom no matter where they're placed. Each of you, I would challenge every single day, find one way that you can move the needle on this. And if you can do that every single day, then over time, we will all together develop a pattern by which we will change our industry. The Dakota tribe said, "We will forever be known by the tracks we leave behind us." Thank you for the work that you all are doing to ensure that the footsteps you're taking are moving us forward in such a precious and special industry like aviation. Thank you.